Quench Juice Bar, Philadelphia. Minority and vet owned, using local vendors for their fruits and adding no added sugar to their products. Available on DoorDash and Grubhub. Grab yours today. Location 1500 Market Street, Suite 1455, Philadelphia, PA.
We'll start it over again. Welcome to another episode of the Hip Hop Uncensored podcast. I'm your brother O-God from Hip Hop News Uncensored, and sitting across from me is my co-host.
What up, y'all? It's your man Sam, CEO of Viral Hip Hop News. You're in the building for a very special edition of the Hip Hop Uncensored podcast. Back for round number 2. We got wonderful Professor James Small on the podcast. How you doing today, sir? Good to have you back on.
I'm good, brothers. It's good to be here. Good to be here. Hope your families had a happy Mother's Day.
Appreciate it. Yours as well, brother. We definitely appreciate you. Appreciate all the mothers out there. Happy belated Mother's Day to all the wonderful mothers that happen to be listening to the show. Let's get right to it. How you feeling? Last interview, we had a very powerful interview about 6 months ago. Got a lot of great response. So how's life been since the last time we've interviewed you?
No, very good. Just getting younger, back in the gym, working out. I look at you young guys and go like, these dudes are buff. I need to get up with them. Things like paid the gym dues. I went back to martial arts on Saturdays with Sensei Mo, so I'm good. Young guys are looking out for me, make sure they don't beat up on the OG, Good,
awesome.
Good. Things are nice. Family as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I see you doing another trip to Ghana as well.
Yes, sir.
Talk about the guy that owns the gym that I know. He's from Ghana too. So talk about your trips over there if you can, and some of the stuff you do on your tours of Ghana, if you can.
Yes, sir. I mean, this is around the 40th year for me. I shared doing this trip to Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Okay. He's been doing it since the 60s. I started in the early 80s.
Okay.
And we tour, we look at the history, we go to the slave dungeons. We follow the historical trail to the sacred river where our people took their last bath before they went into the slave dungeons.
Wow.
We look at the art and cultural centers. We go to museums. We go to traditional leadership in the villages. Like we'll have a naming ceremony, but it's not just the naming ceremony that you give to tourists. This is a naming ceremony that's carried out by the king himself with his chiefs and queen mothers. So it's an authentic ceremony, as much of it as we could do. And you're tied by name to one of the families in that region. So they adopt you as a family member, and you take the name of one of their ancestors. So that's an extremely important part of it. Visiting the museums are always important. We go to the Kakum Park, and we do the canopy walk. You're about 10 stories up looking down into the rainforest.
Wow.
On the rope nets. I did it once in my life. That's once was enough.
Yeah.
But people enjoy it. They just go walking. They go like, wow, I'm scared. But I stand up there and watch them walk and meet them at the other end. But people enjoy that. We'll look at some historical sites, of course, the Nkrumah Memorial. We'll go to the botanical gardens and look at the different herb and fauna that's grown in Ghana. People get a chance to shop with the botanists there and the herbologists there. We'll hang out, at the clubs. The music genre there is called hip life. And one of the leading proponent of that is a brother named Reggie Rockstone. So we hang out at the clubs with Reggie. And we'll actually be in the Capitol on a Wednesday. So he's going to open the club just for our group,
Nice.
Hang out with Reggie Rockstone. And we'll, of course, visit the Kwame Nkrumah Center, the W.B. Du Bois Center, the George Padmore Center. And we'll visit a lot of local communities. Eat at a lot of locals restaurants like Mabel's Table with my Baba Kohen Halevi and his beautiful wife, Sister Mabel. Kohen is from New York, Mount Vernon, New York, and Sister Mabel is from the Volta region of Ghana. But they've been married 30 plus years, and they've run Mabel's Table restaurant for the last 30 plus years. And we'll do other things. We'll get involved in some dancing, some drumming. We'll visit the university. And of course, I'll be lecturing throughout the tour on different aspects of the history and the culture. So we leave here on the 24th of July, and we come back here on the 9th of August. We'll also be attending the Panifest Festival. That's a big one, I forgot. We have something called the Reverential Night, where we march through the streets of Cape Coast to candlelights, and we'll end up at the Cape Coast slave dungeon. And we'll have literally a family reunion. Africans from all over the world and Ghana meet there, and we celebrate our ancestors until midnight. And midnight will lead to the 1st of August, which is Emancipation Day. That day, we'll go to a place called a Sin Mansu. And there's 3 bodies there that was brought to the country who was dug up from the enslaved days. We took one brother from the burial ground in New York. His name was Carson. And he's interned there. And we took a sister years ago from Jamaica called Christos. He had been an ancestor for nearly 400 years. Carson was an ancestor for nearly 200 years. And then an ancestor was brought from Barbados last year, who was nearly 300 years. And we go and pay respect to those ancestors. And then we visit the river where they took the last bath, the river that's called, in the Fanti language, Dunkrosum, or the place, the slave river or the enslaved river, where they were able to take a bath, wash up after marching for weeks, sometimes months, from other parts of Africa to Ghana, and then the slave dungeons and on the ships here, and produce us as some of the baddest Africans on the planet. You know what I'm saying? Because we made up of Africans all over the planet. Plus there were Africans here when we got here, and then we amalgamated with them. And we are something else. The whole world know we are a badass group of Africans.
Having those experiences.
Doesn't matter whether we call ourselves foundational Black Americans, Africans, as long as we are clear that we're Africans. That's the racial name. Everything else are ethnic derivation from that racial stock, And the Africans, we know that we are the first manifestation of human beings on the planet Earth. Everybody else come from us. No discussion. Science have already handled that, So, go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. Okay. How detached are Africans in America from their actual culture? And I mean, Africans in America, I'm about you, my cousin, us as a culture in America. How detached are we from our actual real culture, having the experiences that you've had for the amount of time that you've had?
Not as much as you might think. When I was young, I used to think, people tell us, oh, we lost our history, we lost our culture. And then I started going to Africa. And then I started seeing my grandma. And then I started seeing my grandpa and my granduncles and great aunties. And the people in Africa doing the very same things we do, except we speak English here. So we don't call our rice jollof. We call it red rice. But it's the same jollof rice. You know what I'm saying? So we call our kinky, you make that with corn and mash. We call it grits, right?
Oh, yeah.
We call our what do you call it? They call it something else. We call it dumpling here. It's the same food made the same way by the same people by another name.
Wow.
But we go deeper than that. When I was growing up I grew up on a plantation down in Georgetown County, South Carolina, Acadia Plantation. And I went to a little church called St. Anne's Baptist Church. It used to be a hospital for enslaved Africans before the Civil War. And there's a little school on the back of that called St. Anne's Baptist School, a one-room classroom. I went to school in a one-room classroom with one teacher from 1st grade to 6th grade, and she taught all 6 grades in that same room. Most extraordinary lady, Miss Betty Murray. Love her to eternity.
Yeah.
But the thing that happened when we all got 13 in that little village on the plantation, we were called into the church. Then when I was 17 and 18 and I left the church, I was rejecting Christianity. But I didn't realize the Black church wasn't just about Christianity.
Right.
Christianity gave us the hiding place to submerge and protect the African culture in the only sanctuary we had. So when we were all 13 and rounded up in the village and called into the church to then choose a church father, one of the deacons you had to choose as your sacred spiritual father. And then the girls chose a church mother. Now, I've lost the picture on the screen. I don't know whether that's me or you.
You lost our picture, you saying?
Yeah, my computer just went black.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, it just froze for us too. We can still hear you too, but
Okay, so I'll continue the talking and see if I can bring that back.
okay.
I've never had that happen. Y'all must be raising some fuss out there, scaring somebody. That ain't never happened to Brother Small's computer. Okay.
Wow. Oh, there we go. You see us now?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool.
And at 13, we were all brought in, and we chose a church mother and a church father. And when I started studying, that is the African uncle and the African auntie.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
that's in the culture. But that's when we started. If you read Facing Mount Kenya by Jomo Kenyatta, the head of the Mama and the first president of Kenya, he writes about the age grade training, where boys and girls at age 13 were brought together and began their process of rites of passage. So we were doing the same thing in the church. We were just hiding it, but it was the same African rites of passage. Then we had to go to the morning bench, and we called it getting the Holy Ghost. But you had to get possessed by the African spirit before you could even join the community.
Wow.
All that was African. And when I became a Yoruba priest, I went through a very similar ceremony that I went through when I was initiated into the church.
Wow.
You see, the same kind of possession I had to go through, the name change I had to go through, the reading. So a lot of what we thought we lost, we hid it in the church. We hid it in places like Prince Hall Freemasonry. We hid it in the Knights of Pythias. We hid it in the Odd Fellow organization. We hid it in the Divine Nine. We laugh at it now because we've lost so much. We think the Divine Nine was just about parties. No, that was where we had a chance to do our African thing, out of sight of the enemy. Those were our places of sanctuary. So my little granddaughter, Malia Taylor, she is now 13, and she is in a step group, but she's the only one from her junior high stepping with the New Rochelle High School step group. And they were at the Apollo about a month ago. So I took her with me this past weekend to Brooklyn College, Brooklyn Tech, to witness the opening of the International African Cultural Festival. And they had a band from Haiti, a band from Ghana, a band from Jamaica, a band from Puerto Rico, playing our music so she could see the varied culture. But then the Danny Zulu dance group, an African American cultural group, came on, and they were doing the boot dance out of South Africa. And my baby got to see where step came from. And she didn't want to go, like grandpa dragging me off. She was crying in the car a little bit. But when she saw that, because she loves stepping, and she goes like, Grandpa, you said it came from Africa. I said, yeah, baby, but we had to hide it because the enemy would know we were still being ourselves. See?
Wow.
And there's a lot more. If you ever go to a church, one of them old throwdown, sanctified church down in Alabama, Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
And you see the women, they be shouting and dancing and jumping over chairs. They're doing the ethnic dance that their grandpeople brought from the African village where they were taking slavery. We call it shouting, but it's their ethnic dance that they've remembered and they've kept hidden in the confines of the church.
Right.
That's deep.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more. But once you go to Africa, it becomes the mirror for the things that you've been doing and didn't know what you were doing. Even hip hop. There isn't a single dance in hip hop that you can't find being practiced in Africa back in the 20s and the 30s and in the turn of the century.
Wow.
Even rapping as a style and a motif, straight up out of Africa. And we didn't have to wait for Eddie to bring it home. You know what I'm saying?
Now, let's talk about like the names, like, in the church, they refer to Jesus.
Right.
I'm sure they weren't referring to that in Africa. So what kind of take us through that whole divide and like, okay, now they calling somebody by a different name.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, sir. Because we speak in a different language, right?
Okay. Okay.
We're speaking English,
Okay.
and we can't practice Yoruba because they're gonna kill us, right? We can't practice Akan tradition because they'll kill us.
Okay.
We can't practice the voodoo tradition because they'll burn our space down and kill us. So how do we continue worshiping the divine and get away with it? Now in Brazil, they call it candomblé. They took the African and they mix it with the Catholic tradition, and they call it candomblé. In Cuba, they took the African and they mix it with the Catholic Christianity, and they call it Lucomi. Okay? In Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, they did the same thing, but they call it saint worship or santeria. Well, in America, and all of those communities I just mentioned were majority Black community with a minority white oppression. But we grew up in the United States with a majority white oppressors and a minority Black community. You understand? So we couldn't hide our stuff the way they did it.
Okay.
So we had to hide it the way we did it. So in America, it's called hoodoo and root. But white media didn't talk much about our root tradition. My grandma was a root lady. Meant she was an African priestess. She was a hoodoo woman. Okay? And behind our root healing tradition, we hid our spiritual tradition. But we had to hide it in the church because that was the only place where we had some safe sanctuary. But today, the young people who are traveling by the thousands to Africa are beginning to see things grandma used to do and grandpa used to do and great auntie used to do being done as normal culture in Africa. And so we're beginning to rediscover ourselves. And we hadn't lost ourselves as much as the world would like for us to think. And remember, in the United States, right, we're the 4th largest African population in the world, the 3rd largest in the Western Hemisphere. Brazil has the 1st largest African population.
Okay.
Colombia, believe it or not, have the 2nd largest African population.
Wow, I never knew that.
And then the United States, we have the 3rd largest African population, which make us the 4th in the world because Nigeria has the 1st largest African population in any nation state.
I want to transition a little bit. In the beginning of our conversation, you talked about how you were getting younger. You talked about your health. You talked about working out, eating right, and being a little more conscious of your body and just your health overall. We've seen what Jamie Foxx went through over the last month, and luckily, given the news reports, allegedly he's doing a lot better. He's in a rehabilitation center. He's looking to do his show and get back to his career. Thank God, everybody, or he's okay. You know, because at the end of the day, that's all we cared about. But let's talk about just health when it pertains to Black men in America as a whole. The diet is completely different than what we were accustomed to having early on. The way that we live, the stress levels that we go through. There's a multitude of things that we deal with as Black men that could put our health in very compromising situations. So just speak on that a little bit. What you thought of the Jamie Foxx situation and health overall as Black men.
Yeah, and I'm praying for Jamie and asking the ancestors and the divine to continue to bless his recovery, him and his family. He's a beautiful brother, great artist, great performer. But we are under a lot of stress in this culture and have been for centuries. And so when I was talking to the brother Maurice, and we were trying to look at what is affecting us most. And so I wrote down some stats on the health of the African American male. And the number one killer is the heart attack. And, within the context of heart attack is strokes.
Yes, sir.
And that's 23.7%.
Man.
The number two killer of Black men is cancer. That's 26.2%. You know, unintentional injuries like a car accident and other kinds of accidents, that's about 7%. And what shocked me was high blood pressure is only 1.6%. I thought that would be much higher,
Yeah.
right? Kidney disease is about 2%.
Wow.
Diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, is about 4.7%. And stroke comes in at about 4%. Okay. And so a lot, though, the heart disease, the cancer, the stroke, the diabetes, the kidney disease, a lot of this has to do with diet and exercise and stress. Those three monsters. And with stress probably being at the top of the list, and diet would be definitely second.
Yeah.
You know, so even at this age, at 77, I'm beginning to move more towards being a vegan. You know, so I'm still hanging on to the fish. Every now and then on a holiday, I'll chop on some bird. You know what I'm saying? But most of the times, I'm moving more towards being a vegetarian and splitting that between cooked vegetables and raw vegetables. And I'm seeing the marked difference. Drinking multiple kinds of herbal teas, which my big brother is helping his little brother. My big brother's 86. He's healthier than I am. He's a lumberjack up in Northern California.
Wow.
He's the coolest dude in the world. He's always been my hero. But diet is essential and important. And those stats I just gave you for 23%, heart attack killing us, cancer 26%, you can see diet directly involved in both of those in terms of cholesterol, the clogging of arteries, and that sort of thing. And the polluting, of course, of the lung, because I smoked cigarettes for a lot of years. And I only really stopped about 2 years ago, cold turkey, when I had to have knee surgery. And the surgeon would say, like, look, Small, I like you, but I'm not operating on you until you get the nicotine out of your system.
Wow.
Because it's going to impair your healing. So I did. I just cold turkey, bam, stopped 24 months ago. Right. And so my healing was extraordinary because I'm back in martial arts class, studying under Sensei Mo. You know, I'm back in the gym. I'm doing my 2-3 mile walking in the morning. Just not to do nothing extraordinary, just to be healthy.
Right.
Just to be healthy enough so I can talk to you young brothers. I met the bus today, as I do every day, and pick up my young grandson.
Nice.
To watch him. He just turned 10 years old. And a few weeks ago, and he called me 1 minute after midnight. I said, Grandpa, I'm in the double figures. And so we lost a beautiful brother today, Brother Perkins, who was a Black politician in New York and one of the few who helped Khalid Muhammad when Khalid was creating the Million Youth March.
Okay.
And we lost Perkins today at age 74. I'm blessed to be at 77 going into 78.
Oh, yeah.
And so health is essential if you're going to continue to assist the family. Health is essential if we're going to continue imparting information to the younger generation about our experience walking ahead of you. So I tell my people, move towards eating the vegetables. The more vegetables in your system, and I'm not going to lie, every now and then I break down and throw a steak in the oven.
Yeah.
But I minimize that by about 70, 80%. You know?
Good.
And I love to have a cold beer. And I love a nice Merlot. I got two in the wine right now. But I cut back on how much of it that I drink.
Yeah.
So that I may have maybe a glass of wine once or twice a month. I may have a bottle of beer 2 or 3 times a week. And most of what I drink is just plain water.
Yeah.
You know, and having a good cup of tea once or twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and doing your exercise. You don't necessarily, I joined the gym because I want to have access to equipment, but most of my exercising I do right in my bedroom.
Yep.
You know, once you learn what's good for each part of your body, And my weight, I'm 6'2", and I'm weighing it at 192, which is a good weight for that and the age. So that's just become important. And your children, your grandchildren especially, watch you. They're like, oh, Grandpa, you could do that. Grandpa, you could do 10 push-ups, 15 push-ups. Yeah, then they get down and try to show up and see if they can outdo Grandpa. But the health, and for the Black male, health is essential because of the kind of crises we went through during the slavery process and the extension of that, the Jim Crow process. We suffered. The same thing with our women. And so we got to kind of catch up. And we've been doing pretty good at it, but we need to do better with our health. It's just significant and important that we do better with our health. And
Absolutely.
And one thing I wanted to point out that, the Africans in North America, we were enslaved for a shorter period of time than any other group of Africans in the Western Hemisphere, except those in Trinidad.
Okay.
Because slavery occurred in Trinidad very late in the process. And here in America, we were not enslaved for 400 years. It was only 230 something years.
Okay.
Okay. And so that meant that we have a lot more African retention than anyone want to give us credit for.
Right.
Because nobody talks about our Creole language, which we speak in Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, South Carolina, Florida. We call it in parts of the country Gullah Geechee, and other parts we just call it Creole. But we look at other people's language retention, but we don't look at ours. But anytime you hear an African American speak English, we speak it different.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter what degree we have, we still say things like, I've been going to do something, because we do that African thing of repetitive consonant when we speak a language. Only Africans do that. Even though we speak English, if you really look at the grammar structure of African Americans, it sounds like we speak in English vocabularically, right? But grammatically, we're speaking English with an African grammar structure. Look at it.
Wow.
Look at
Deep,
it.
deep.
Small, understand something.
It just kind of gives you understanding. My bad to cut you off. About in school and how sometimes we relayed and understood information and absorbed information in some of the school systems that we grew up in, and giving us reason as to why certain things maybe didn't articulate as effectively as they wanted to, because we were listening on it on a whole different level.
Right.
Right. We didn't understand English because we wasn't speaking English.
Right.
Though we were using English vocabulary, we were still speaking grammatically our indigenous African language structure in our minds.
It's interesting.
I'm gonna ask you about it kind of ties in a little bit, or it does tie in. Some of the people that have the story, they say, well, slavery never existed. We was already here in America. And you said that some of us were here in America, but that movement kind of, I don't know if it's new or not, but I started hearing it a few years ago.
Yeah.
They saying, well, how do you feel about that whole movement? I think they call it Aboriginals or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, everywhere in the world, we were first. We were the Aboriginals in Australia.
Right.
We were the Aboriginals in England. We were the Aboriginal in Ireland and Scotland. So what? If we were Aboriginal everywhere in the world, don't it make sense that we were the Aborigines in North America too? How is North America was possibly going to get an exemption? Of course we were here before even the Asiatics, who we call Indians, got here. The reason you had red people, because the yellow people and the black people had already mixed before the white people got here. You understand? It was the yellow, brown, black that created the very red, ruddy. I'm a classical example of that. I grew up in South Carolina cleaning and taking care of what we call mounds, or the burial place of my Native American ancestors, which our grandfather had us do twice a year. But because I had indigenous ancestors to North America before my other ancestors came doing slavery, do I denounce those that went through the genocide of slavery? That's silly.
Right.
It's childish and it's immature. But I understand why people do it. You know, self-hate didn't die out when we started fighting for Black studies. And some of us still find an excuse to hate Africa. My thing is fine. That's just more gold for me. That's just more diamonds for me.
Right.
That's just more coltan and cobalt and bauxite and manganese and cocoa left for me. But I'm not going to be selfish. It is my duty to inform and to instruct my misinformed brothers and sisters about their ancient heritage.
Speaking on misinformation.
That's right. The fact that we were in Australia as Aborigine don't deny the fact that the Australian Aborigine originated in Africa. You go to India today, you find millions of people black as night, but they migrated there in the ancient times from Africa. You go to Vietnam and Cambodia, Japan and China, the original population was black and nappy haired because we migrated there from Africa. We migrated to the United States from Africa. And we taught Columbus and the others how to follow the water current that our ancestors followed that brought them to the Americas. So that's not new. It's just that we have to stop letting the ignorant guide us. Do the research. Do the study. Study the John Henry Clark, the Sheikh Anta Diop, the Ivan Van Sertima, the Dr. Jacob Carruthers, the Dr. Asa Hilliard, the Dr. Leonard Jeffries, the Dr. Francis Welsing, the Dr. Rosalind Jeffries. These people have done the research for us. And then after we've studied them, then go out and travel around the world and do some research for yourself.
There you go.
And it comes down to knowing self so you can begin to do what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan tell us to do: love thyself.
Absolutely.
Know thyself, then begin to love thyself. And stop fighting over fractured identity. Yes, we were Moors, some of us. Yes, we were Hebrew Israelites, some of us. Yes, we were Christians before there was a Catholic Church, some of us. Yes, we were black like Prophet Muhammad when we founded Islam, some of us. But all of us was never any one of those things. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Those were different ethnic identity at different times in history and different locations in the world. But today we have come together and amalgamated as one Africa, especially in the United States, where we came from all over Africa and all over the Americas, where some of us were before the slave ships, and we've amalgamated as one.
Yes, sir.
And like I say, I'm one of them. And you can look at my face, my skin texture, tone, my nose, my bone structure, and you know who I am. I'm Tuscarora. I'm Chakora. But I'm also Mendi, Yoruba, Akan, Ewe, and Kemetic, and not ashamed of any of them. Proud of all of it.
Great. Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate that. I don't know if you've seen been a couple weeks now, the controversy of the Cleopatra movie on Netflix. They said that
I'm all up in that.
please expound on that,
One
because
of the key
obviously
writers is my goddaughter.
oh wow. Well, you got
Ooh.
Egypt itself saying that they're shunning the film and they want to make it a lighter woman. Cleopatra was a lighter woman.
They
Egypt
didn't
is saying
argue
that.
when Elizabeth Taylor played her.
Right.
But how you going to argue when a black woman played the role in a movie of a woman born and raised in Africa, died in Africa? Those people who are now citizens of the country called Egypt, none of their ancestors was in Egypt.
Wow.
When that happened. So these little light-skinned people, brown-skinned people, and white-skinned people, you were still running around Europe in the days of Cleopatra. The Greeks were viewing themselves as a people of color back then.
Yeah.
Even. You should read history and find out who Clitus was. Alexander, the so-called Great's bodyguard, who he killed in a drunken stupor before he was assassinated by his own generals for marrying a black woman and giving birth to their black son, all of whom was assassinated by the generals led by Ptolemy in killing their own great Alexander. And when he killed his black bodyguard, according to your own white literature, you said, the bodyguard as he's dying, fool that you are, you've killed your mother's son. So if his brother is black, what the hell was Alexander? You want to get the brother small, you know? I read Homer's Odyssey and Iliad at 8 in the library of George Vanderbilt. You know, I'm well read in Greek literature. I've read Herodotus, book 2. It's all about the black people in Egypt.
Wow.
Plato, in his writing, Phaedrus, refers to the Egyptian, because that word Egyptian wasn't being used then. The Greeks referred to the Egyptians then as Ethiopians, baked in the sun, black-skinned ones.
Wow.
And Plato said the Ethiopian gave the world all of its sciences. This is your boy. This is Plato. He's written this for posterity in his book called Phaedrus. And he said, we gave the world medicine, arithmetic, geometry, then astronomy. And he goes on, anatomy. And he said, but the greatest science of all that the Ethiopian gave to the world was the science of writing itself. This young man, this Plato. Don't go to Herodotus in his history of book 2, because he said the very gods of Greece were brought from Africa by black birds, which was the phrase using for African priestess. Said. So the Arabs really don't want to have this discussion because then I have to take back the Black Muhammad. Wa alayhi wa salam. Because when I was a Muslim imam who went to Mecca, I was then El Hajj Amin Shahid, who went before and was credentialized by the Rabat Alim El Islamim, which is the highest credentializing body there.
Okay.
And they acknowledge that the Prophet Muhammad, wa alayhi wa salam, was a child of Ethiopian Black grand parentage.
Wow.
But they don't want to have this real discussion.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So leave the little Cleopatra thing alone. And because they got involved in it, my goddaughter sent me a text a couple of days ago. It came in as the number 5th most watched Netflix film in the world. So they gave us more publicity
Right.
by trying to stop it. And I watched the whole thing. It's a fantastic movie.
Awesome.
Well
Awesome.
acted, you know.
Yeah.
And like my daughter said, you know, they took out a lot of the black that the black writers put in there, but it was still black enough for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extraordinary story. And the Thelamies, the Greeks who were in Egypt for nearly 300 years,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think happened? Did you think they got lighter or did they get blacker?
Mm.
That's the majority of the people who they and their soldiers would marry were black women. And the British who found the tomb of the sister of Cleopatra just a few years ago have proven through DNA that her sister was African. So if the damn sister's African, what do we think Cleopatra was?
Right.
Wow. Wow.
Now, Cleopatra the Seventh, I think is who we are talking about. Cleopatra is a title and not a person.
Mm.
And the particular Cleopatra we are talking about is the last in the line of those who came through the family dynasty that was started by Alexander's general Ptolemy. But she's 300 years later evolving in Africa. So what do you think he looked like?
Right.
And these people who are now calling themselves Egyptians, they are Turks from the Mamluk Turks who invaded Egypt, who came in as slaves, the Seljuk Turks,
Mm.
the Eastern European Serbs who was enslaved for hundreds of years by the Turks,
Wow.
and the Ottoman Turks. These are not even Arabs who are now calling themselves Arab Egyptians.
Mm.
So it would be well that they should leave the topic alone.
Mm. Deep, deep. I want to something. This happened earlier in the year, top of the year. Malcolm X's family announced that they'll be filing a lawsuit against the CIA, the FBI, and the NYPD for wrongful death. I want to get your thoughts on that, if you may.
Yeah. Have you ever watched the piece Godfather of Harlem?
I haven't.
Heard of it for sure,
Yeah,
but never
you
seen
seen
it.
it?
Oh,
Okay.
y'all just missing out on a good thing. Well, I'm the primary consultant on that project.
Oh wow.
Wow.
And Malcolm X was one of the primary characters in the project. And you should watch it, especially the last episode in series, the third series, which we just finished. And we show in the movies the role of the CIA and the FBI and the rationale for them killing Malcolm. You got to watch it. It'll blow your mind, especially episode 10
Okay.
in year 3, which was just aired on MGM Plus. And the suit is right on. You know, I know all of the children, of course, because I was the imam over Malcolm's mosque after his assassination. Which most people don't know. They know me as the professor from City College, but they don't know me as the imam of the Muslim Mosque, Inc., or as a Haji. That's credentialized by the Rabat Dalim al-Islami. So, no, I've been saying for 58 years that the CIA and the FBI and NYPD orchestrated and to a great degree carried out the assassination of Malcolm X. But once the white folks in Netflix said it, then people go, oh, really? But when us black folks who was there said it, no one wanted to listen. And so on May 19th, we will be making our 58th pilgrimage celebration at the gravesite of Malcolm X. Hundreds of people come every year. I've only missed 2 years, and I've been in charge of conducting it for most of the 58 years.
Mm.
And we do it at the same time, at the same place. It was begun under the leadership of his sister Ella, whose bodyguard I was at the time. She was the president of the OAAU upon the assassination of her brother. And so we will be there this Friday.
Okay.
Doing the same ceremony that we did 58 years ago with some innovations for modernity. There will be buses from Philly, Jersey, Baltimore, New York, upstate. Teachers will bring buses full of their school children.
Mm.
Principals will bring buses from their school. And we've been doing this. The press don't cover us, but that's cool. You know what I'm saying? We declared 58 years ago in a letter that we send to all nations via the UN that this day, May 19, has been declared by us, not the government, to be Malcolm X Day. And we've celebrated it every May 19th since. And on May 19th, around the country, millions of our people recognize this day and will celebrate this day as Malcolm X Day. And yes, it is clear by their own records, meaning the records of the State Department who runs the CIA, and the Justice Department's records who runs the FBI, that they orchestrated and gave the orders and paid for the assassination of Malcolm X.
Wow.
On their own files. You know, MGM will go run those stuff and get jammed up if they couldn't prove it.
Right.
As the consultant for the project The Godfather, I had the best research team that money could buy.
Mm.
And the writers, Chris Brancato, Paul Eckstein, Moses, they're some of the best in the country.
Mm-hmm.
With the star, of course, being, and the executive producer, Forrest Whitaker.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the series?
Yeah.
You will see Bumpy throw the CIA off of the roof for killing Malcolm. You will see Bumpy Johnson, Malcolm's friend in real life.
Still with us, Professor?
Orchestrate the killing who was setting Malcolm up. Okay?
Yeah.
Malcolm and Bumpy used to play chess, according to Bumpy's granddaughter, Margaret, who was with us when we started the series. She passed away in the second year. Malcolm was at their house every Sunday playing chess. Bumpy was an avid chess player. He beat Bobby Fischer twice. That's how good the man was. He studied poetry under Langston Hughes. This dude was
Damn.
Wow. Bumpy Johnson?
yeah, the
Wow.
gangster, Bumpy Johnson. He was a hell of a scholar, businessman, yeah, a
Wow.
gangster.
That's all we really ever known him for was that, the gangster
Yeah.
part of it.
Right. That's why we did the story at the behest of his granddaughter, Margaret,
Okay.
who did the original script from which the rest of the script was formed.
Wow. Maybe definitely want to go check that series out now.
Yeah, check it out. You're going to get hooked like a whole bunch of people on it. It's a nice piece. It tells a good story.
Yes, sir. We're not going to hold you too much longer.
A lot of history is in there because I saw to it that the history got put in there. And with my partner and brother, you know, Chris Brancato, Paul Eckstein, brother Mark, Forrest Whitaker, you know, and we had some of the best female actresses in the country. You know, watch the piece. You may even want to do a show just on that.
Right.
Just on the Godfather of Harlem and looking at some of the authenticity where the history was concerned.
For sure.
We also feature the Reverend Congressman Dr. Adam Clayton Powell.
Yeah.
With Giancarlo Esposito playing the role. You know, Giancarlo ain't no joke. The brother can really act. You know, I mean, he's something special.
Absolutely appreciate that. Appreciate you, Professor Small, and Hip Hop Uncensored Podcast. Don't got too many more questions. Not gonna hold you too long. Definitely appreciate your time and your knowledge. Last conversation we had with you, we talked extensively about Kanye West and what he was currently going through. We've seen recently that Adidas, stuck on a lot of his inventory, are now going to sell it and give proceeds to not only the Jewish community, but communities affected internationally by the hate speech that Kanye West exhibited during that time. So which day is soon. But they didn't say anything about the black culture, which he obviously offended too. Maybe not all of us, but according to some of us, he was offensive by what he said. What do you think about that overall? What Adidas stance is currently?
First of all, I don't think Kanye did any hate speech. First, let's get to that.
Neither do we.
Okay. No one says Jewish people is doing hate speech when they criticize the people who wrongfully created the Holocaust. So how is it that we are doing hate speech when we deal with the people who did our Holocaust? Or some of the people who participated in our Holocaust?
Yes, sir.
Not all Jews participated in our Holocaust, but a significant amount of their leadership for centuries did. Not all Irish or Scots or Anglo-Saxons participated in our Holocaust, but a significant numbers did for centuries. And unlike other genocide, which happened in a 3-year period or a 10-year period, our genocide was carried on for centuries. So nobody can say, oh, I didn't know what was going on. It was intergenerational. And all white religions and ethnic nations fully participated and profited from the genocide that they dared to call the transatlantic slavery or chattel slavery. Centuries long genocide that made you very wealthy. The very companies that will continue the genocide in the music industry, in the movie industry, in the news industry, in the television industry, how dare you take a few lines from Kanye and try to play with our minds? Who do you think you are? We read, be grateful that we're not a vengeful people. Be grateful.
Yeah.
That we are not a vengeful people.
I was we had I don't know if you know Harry.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about that, I
Yes,
heard
sir.
that they want to give money from the sale of these sneakers to certain people. That's fine. And then have them split the money as reparations for their role in the transatlantic slave trade and the enslavement genocide of African people. Then I'm cool with it.
Right. Indeed.
That's all.
I don't know if you know Harry, Rabbi Harry Rosenberg. We had him on a few months, maybe 5 months ago. We asked him about, the transatlantic slave trade and Jewish participation. And he said that he feels like that we should go to the families that actually did the enslaving to get them to pay reparations. That all Jewish people are pretty much not responsible for it. How you feel about that?
But nearly all Jewish people, like all white people, profited from it. So then denounce those then who were responsible for it. Tell us who they are. But
Yes,
you've
sir.
done so because the literature on slavery that pulls the cover of that element of the Jewish community that was involved was all written by Jewish scholars.
Yep.
So you've already pulled the cover off of it.
Yep.
It was like the attack on Leonard Jeffries. He got attacked for quoting Jewish scholarship and Jewish writings on elements of the Jewish community's involvement in the genocide called chattel slavery. Remember, chattel slavery was not a work program. It was a centuries-long genocide for the sake of making money and garnering wealth.
Absolutely.
So let's not play with what you did. It wasn't a work program that we signed up for. It was genocide. And you made money.
Yeah.
And you built wealth. And let's come back to Kanye just for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a veteran of the U.S. Navy.
Okay.
With an honorable discharge. We in the Navy understood the term DEF-CON. He did not say death. He said DEF-CON.
Yes, he did.
And there was 3 levels. There's DEF-CON 1, DEF-CON 2, and DEF-CON 3. And it means prepare for being attacked by your enemy. With 3 being the highest level of preparedness and entering a posture of defensiveness. The media knew what he said, and then they decide to lie to the American people for the sake of ratings and sensationalism, not caring who they destroyed or what conflict they created between our 2 people. We know there are Jewish people who died in our movement defending Black people. So we're not about being anti-Jewish.
Right.
There were Jewish people who fought on the side of the North in the Civil War, and there were Jewish people who fought on the side of the South in the Civil War. There were Irish people who fought on the side of the North in the Civil War, And there were Irish people who fought on the side of the South in the Civil War. This is just history. Stop trying to treat Black people like we are stupid.
Mm.
We are clear on who our enemies are and have been. That's why you do not want to teach our history in schools. That's why you are anti-Black studies and Africana studies in the school system, because the truth of the behavior of certain elements of all European populations will be told.
Powerful.
I have brothers who are white. I will die for them because they will die for me. And I have enemies who are white, as I do have enemies who are Black. So let's stop playing the throw the stone game and let's tell the historical truth so the youngsters can better understand how to build good relationships across ethnic and racial and religious lines. But it profits some people to keep the division among the American people.
I want to transition just a little bit into sports and talk about the young man John Morant, superstar of the Memphis Grizzlies, who's obviously out here influenced by some very negative things. And I'm not saying that having a gun and owning a gun is negative, because I encourage that for him to be able to protect himself. It's how he's using it and how he's kind of portraying it, which is, I believe personally, is wrong. But what do you think about the media's portrayal of John Morant, young 23-year-old man, superstar? And how do you perceive that situation?
Like you, I think we have a right to own weapons for self-defense. But I also know that the negative socialization process in this country, as we can see in the 200 plus mass shooting just in the year of 23, is very dangerous for the well-being of the nation. And this young man is no less influenced by the negative socialization than any young man or woman in the society. And if you're going to own a weapon, then you should own it responsibly.
Yes.
I actually recommend, and this is the one thing I like about the state of Israel, every American male and female child, when graduating from high school, should do 2 years of military service. And I guarantee you, the relationship to weapons and the responsibility for how it is used would be cut by 90%. You look at those nations around the world where the youth have to do national service, involved, participating in its armed forces, and you do not see in those countries the murders, the mass killings, the suicide by weapons that we see in America.
Wow.
It is because people learn how to be responsible human beings when it comes to utilizing and being involved with firearms. And the values you put on human life when you learn a certain level of responsibility.
Sir.
Yeah, I'm good to go. Yeah.
Professor Small on the Hip Hop Uncensored podcast. We definitely appreciate your time, your wealth of knowledge as always.
Yes, sir.
Definitely learned something. We're speaking to you and definitely appreciate it. Let the people know where they can find you. Let the people know where they can continue to follow
Yes,
your
sir.
wisdom and information. And like I said, again, appreciate your time.
Professor Small, AfricanWorld.com, and just put in James.313.com. Well, Professor Small, African World, you can find any and all things about me or www.professorjamessmall.com.
Appreciate you. Once again, we definitely appreciate you. All your knowledge and
Appreciate you, young brothers.
Yes, sir.
The world belongs to you. Lead it in the most ethical and the most principled and moral way possible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Continue to do the job.
Peace
Professor
and
James
blessings.
Small on the Hip Hop Uncensored podcast. We appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, sir. Peace.
All right. He jumped off? Or? Oh, okay.